Get your black ass out of my seat.
A police chief said that to a black man sitting alone in a coffee shop, drinking coffee he paid for. Then he grabbed him by the collar, slammed his face into the table, and cuffed him in broad daylight. A dozen people watched. But before the cuffs clicked shut, Aaron Cole looked at him and said one thing. You're making a mistake. Thornton yanked the cuffs tighter and shoved his head into the table.
Your junkie mama should have swallowed you. Now shut up before I crack your skull.
The room was dead silent. Because what this chief didn't know was that this black man he just crushed into a table in a coffee shop, this was the sting. 3 years in the making, and Thornton just handed him the final piece. But before we get to how this all fell apart for Chief Gerald Thornton, you need to understand the town that made him, and the man he picked the wrong fight with. Ridgemont. Population just under 90,000. Nice downtown. Farmers market on Saturdays. Good schools on the west side. The kind of city that puts community first on its welcome sign and means it, as long as you look the part. About 30% of Ridgemont is black. Has been for decades. But if you looked at the leadership of the police department, you'd think it was a different city entirely. Nearly every senior officer was white. The chief was white. The deputy chief was white. The internal affairs supervisor, the person in charge of investigating complaints against officers, was white, and he reported directly to the chief. So when complaints came in, and they came in often, they went through a system that was designed, whether on purpose or not, to make them disappear. Here's what that looked like. The first formal complaint about Chief Thornton. A black driver said Thornton called him boy during a traffic stop and held him on the side of the road for 45 minutes without explanation. The complaint was reviewed internally, finding inconclusive. Case closed. 3 complaints in a single quarter. One from a black business owner who said Thornton told him his store attracted the wrong crowd. Another from a black woman who was stopped twice in 1 week walking in her own neighborhood. A third from a teenager who said he was patted down outside a convenience store for looking nervous. All 3 complaints were investigated by the same internal affairs officer. All 3 were closed. No discipline, no follow-up. A local pastor, a man named Reverend James Whitmore, who had served the community for 22 years, wrote an open letter to the city council. He described a pattern. He named names. He asked for an independent review. The council acknowledged the letter, thanked Reverend Whitmore for his civic engagement, and took no action. A statewide civil rights organization published a report. Ridgemont was flagged. The data was damning. Black residents were 4 times more likely to be stopped, searched, and detained than white residents in the same neighborhoods. The report recommended federal oversight. The city pushed back, called the data misleading, and hired a public relations firm. And then, something changed. Quietly, without any press release or public announcement, the State Bureau of Professional Standards opened a preliminary inquiry into the Ridgemont Police Department. The person who authorized that inquiry was a man named Aaron Cole. Now let me tell you about Aaron Cole. Because the man Thornton handcuffed in that coffee shop is not who Thornton thought he was. Not even close. Aaron Cole, 44 years old, grew up in West Baltimore. Not the nice part. The part where you learn early that the system isn't built for you. And if you want to survive it, you have to understand it better than the people running it. He worked his way through college, then law school. Then the FBI, where he spent a decade in the Civil Rights Division, the unit that investigates police departments, hate crimes, and abuses of power. He was good at it, quietly good. The kind of agent who builds airtight cases because he knows the system will look for any crack to throw them out. 3 years ago, Aaron was recruited to lead the state's Bureau of Professional Standards. His job? Investigate law enforcement misconduct across the entire state. Departments that can't or won't police themselves. And Ridgemont was near the top of his list. But here's the thing about Aaron. You wouldn't know any of this by looking at him. He doesn't dress like a federal official. No suit, no tie, no government car. When he moved to Ridgemont 4 months ago, he told his neighbors he was a retired school administrator. He wore khaki jackets and reading glasses, carried a newspaper everywhere, drank his coffee black at the same corner table every morning at Common Grounds, a little independent shop downtown owned by a woman named Nora Whitfield. To everyone in that neighborhood, Aaron Cole was just a quiet, polite, middle-aged black man who kept to himself. And that was exactly what he wanted them to think, especially Chief Thornton. Now let me tell you about Common Grounds, because this coffee shop isn't just a location, it's the crime scene. And every single person inside it that Tuesday morning played a role, whether they knew it or not. Common Grounds has been open for 20 years. Nora Whitfield inherited it from her mother, who opened it back when downtown Ridgemont was still half-empty storefronts and cracked sidewalks. Nora kept it going through recessions, construction, a pandemic. It's the kind of place where the regulars don't need to order because the barista already knows. Coffee's decent. Pastries are homemade. There's a chalkboard by the door with a quote that changes every Monday. Nora is 63, white, raised in Ridgemont her whole life. She treats everyone the same. The mayor, the mailman, the college kids studying for finals. That's not a performance. That's just who she is. But over the last few years, Nora noticed something she couldn't ignore. Every time Chief Thornton walked into her shop, the atmosphere changed. It was like someone turned the temperature down 10 degrees. Black customers would get quiet. Some would leave. A few stopped coming altogether. One regular, a retired postal worker named Clifton, who'd been coming every Saturday for 6 years, just vanished. Nora asked around. A friend told her Clifton said he didn't feel safe there anymore. Not because of the shop, because of who might walk in. That broke something in Nora. About 6 months before the day Thornton handcuffed Aaron, Nora got a phone call. The voice on the other end was polite, professional, and careful. The caller identified himself as a representative of a state government agency and said he wanted to have a private conversation about her experience as a business owner in Ridgemont. No pressure. No obligation, just a conversation. Nora agreed. They met in a diner 2 towns over, and that conversation changed everything. She learned that the state had been watching Ridgemont for a while, that her shop, because Thornton frequented it and because it was a place where his behavior toward black customers had been observed repeatedly, had become a point of interest in a much larger investigation. They asked Nora if she'd be willing to help. Not in a dramatic way, not wearing a trench coat or hiding in shadows, just, would she be willing to wear a small recording device during business hours? Just in case Thornton said or did something worth documenting. Nora said yes, didn't hesitate. Now here's the other piece. About 4 months before the incident, Common Grounds hired a new barista, a guy named Ray, mid-30s, friendly, great with espresso, always smiling. Customers loved him. Nora loved him. He showed up on time, never complained, and had a way of making small talk that put people at ease. Ray Coleman was not a barista. Ray Coleman was a decorated detective with 11 years on the force, handpicked by Aaron Cole and embedded in Common Grounds as part of the undercover operation. His job was simple: watch, listen, and document. Every time Thornton came in, Ray noted the time, who was present, what was said, and how black customers were treated. He logged it all in encrypted reports that were transmitted to the Bureau every 72 hours. Between Nora's wire, Ray's observation logs, and Aaron's own presence at that corner table every morning, Common Grounds had become the most surveilled coffee shop in the state, and Thornton had no idea. Now, Tuesday morning, the day it all came together. It's 9:15. Common Grounds is moderately busy. A couple of college students near the window, an older white man reading a paperback by the door, a young mother with a stroller near the counter. Nora is at the register. Ray is behind the espresso machine. And Aaron Cole is in his usual corner, newspaper open, coffee half finished, reading glasses on. Everything is normal. Everything is calm. Then the door opens. Chief Gerald Thornton walks in. He's not in full uniform. Dress shirt, badge clipped to his belt, sidearm visible on his hip. Behind him is a younger officer, Brenda Sullivan, early 30s, carrying a file folder. They're not here for coffee. You can tell by the way Thornton moves. He doesn't walk into a room. He occupies it. Shoulders wide, chin up, eyes scanning like he's doing a sweep. He goes to the counter, orders without saying please. Doesn't call Nora by name even though he's been coming here for years. Ray hands him his coffee. Thornton doesn't look at him, doesn't say thank you, just takes the cup and turns around. And that's when his eyes land on Aaron, the only black man in the shop. Thornton stares. Not a glance, a stare, the kind that measures someone, the kind that decides who you are before you open your mouth. His jaw tightens. He takes a sip of his coffee. Then he walks straight to Aaron's table. He doesn't introduce himself, doesn't ask a question. He stands over Aaron, badge at eye level, gun at hip level, and looks down. "How long you been sitting here?" Aaron looks up, calm. "About an hour." "An hour." Thornton repeats it like it's a confession. "And you're doing what exactly? Just sitting here?" "Drinking my coffee, reading my paper." Thornton leans forward, puts one hand on the table. "You know what I think? I think you're casing this place. I think you've been watching the register. I think you're waiting for the right moment." Aaron doesn't blink. "I'm a retired teacher, sir. I come here every morning." "Retired teacher." Thornton almost laughs. "Right. Let me see some ID now." There's no legal basis for this. Aaron hasn't committed a crime. He hasn't threatened anyone. He's a customer in a public business. But Thornton frames it as a welfare check, a word law enforcement has used for decades as a blank check to stop, question, and detain people without probable cause, especially black people. Aaron reaches into his jacket slowly. He pulls out a state-issued ID, his cover identity. The name reads, Aaron Cole, retired educator. Thornton takes it, glances at it, and drops it on the table like it's garbage. Retired educator. He says it the way you'd say, "Sure you are." Pure contempt. Then he leans in close enough for Aaron to smell his aftershave, and lowers his voice. "I'm going to give you 60 seconds. 60. You're going to stand up, walk out that door, and I don't want to see your face in my downtown again. Not this shop, not this block, not this side of the bridge. Are we clear?" His downtown, his shop, his block, his bridge. Everything belongs to Thornton. The town, the streets, the rules, and definitely not the man sitting in front of him. Aaron sets his coffee down, folds his reading glasses, places them on the newspaper. "I'd like to finish my coffee, sir. I have the right to be here." Something shifts behind Thornton's eyes. It's not anger, it's something colder. It's the look of a man who has never been told no by someone he considers beneath him, and doesn't plan to start now. The room feels it. The college students exchange a look. The young mother quietly rolls her stroller toward the door. The old man with the paperback sets his book down but doesn't move. Brenda Sullivan, standing 3 steps behind Thornton, shifts her weight from one foot to the other. Her hand moves to her radio. She doesn't press it. And behind the counter, Ray Coleman wipes the same glass he's been wiping for 30 seconds. His face shows nothing, but his eyes don't leave Thornton. Nobody knows it yet. But 3 separate recording devices are capturing every word, every breath, every pause. Aaron's newspaper, Nora's wire, Ray's unit behind the counter. The room has ears, and a memory that doesn't forget. What happens next takes less than 10 seconds, but it changes everything. And that's exactly what Thornton was counting on, that this would be familiar, routine. Just another quiet Tuesday where he reminded someone who runs this town. But this Tuesday was different. What happens next takes 8 seconds. Thornton grabs Aaron by the back of his jacket, yanks him out of the chair, and slams him chest first into the table. The coffee cup flies off the edge and shatters on the floor. The newspaper tears under Aaron's face. His reading glasses skid across the table and fall. Thornton pulls Aaron's arms behind his back and cuffs him. Tight. The metal clicks twice, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Then Thornton speaks. Not to Aaron, to the room. He wants an audience. Trespassing, failure to comply with a lawful order, resisting arrest. 3 charges. Every single one fabricated. Aaron didn't trespass. Nora never asked him to leave. There was no lawful order. A man drinking coffee is not committing a crime. And he didn't resist. He didn't even raise his voice. But Thornton isn't building a legal case. He's building a narrative, right there in real time, loud enough so every person in that coffee shop hears the words trespassing and resisting and thinks maybe, just maybe, The man in handcuffs did something to deserve it. That's how it works. You don't need the charges to stick. You just need the story to sound right for the first 30 seconds. By the time the truth catches up, the damage is done. Thornton marches Aaron through the shop. Past the college students. One of them has her phone out now, hands shaking, recording. Past the old man at the door who looks away like he's watching something he doesn't want to remember. Past Nora, who is gripping the counter so hard her knuckles are bone white. Past Ray, who doesn't move, doesn't speak, but watches every step with the focus of a man trained to notice everything. Outside, a patrol car is already waiting at the curb. Thornton radioed ahead before he even walked into the shop. Think about that. He came in planning to make an arrest. The coffee was never the point. The ID check was never the point. Thornton walked into Common Grounds that morning with one intention: to remove a black man from a space he decided that man didn't deserve to be in. Aaron is guided into the back seat of the patrol car. Head ducked, hands behind his back, in full view of the street. A woman walking her dog stops and stares. A man in a business suit pauses mid-step on the sidewalk. Two shop owners across the street come to their windows. This is the part Thornton wanted. The public display. The message. See what happens when you don't listen. But here's what Thornton couldn't see. Aaron Cole's heart rate, recorded by a concealed biometric monitor strapped beneath his shirt, barely changed throughout the entire encounter. When Thornton grabbed him, steady. When his face hit the table, steady. When the cuffs clicked shut, steady. 62 beats per minute. The resting heart rate of a man in complete control. Because for Aaron, this was not a crisis. This was the final act of a 3-year operation. And Chief Thornton had just delivered the closing evidence himself. At the Ridgemont police station, Aaron was processed like any other arrest. Fingerprinted, photographed. His personal belongings placed in a clear plastic bag. Wallet, phone, reading glasses, a pen. The intake form listed 3 charges: trespassing, failure to comply, resisting arrest. 3 lies typed into a system built to make lies look official. Thornton didn't stick around for the booking. He went straight to his office and made a phone call. The person on the other end was Deputy Mayor Elaine Foster. Thornton told her he handled a situation downtown, a transient causing problems at a local business. Foster didn't ask questions. She never did. That was the arrangement. Thornton kept the peace. Foster kept Thornton funded. Nobody looked too hard at the details. Meanwhile, Aaron Cole sat in a holding cell, alone. Concrete bench, fluorescent light buzzing overhead. He hadn't asked for a lawyer, hadn't made a phone call, hadn't said a word during processing except one thing. The booking officer, a young guy barely 2 years on the job, later testified about it. He said Aaron looked at him while being fingerprinted and said calmly, almost gently, "Make sure the paperwork is filed correctly. Every box." At the time, the officer thought it was an odd thing to say. Maybe the guy was in shock. Maybe he was just one of those people who gets weirdly calm under pressure. He had no idea that Aaron Cole was making sure the evidentiary chain was airtight, that every form, every timestamp, every signature on that booking sheet would later become evidence in a federal civil rights case. The cell was small. The light was cold. And the man sitting inside it had put more corrupt officers behind bars than anyone else in the state. But nobody in that building knew that. Not yet. 2 hours passed. Aaron sat in that holding cell without moving. No pacing, no fidgeting, no banging on the door or demanding to see a lawyer. Just sitting on that concrete bench, hands folded, staring at the wall like a man waiting for a bus he already knew was coming. The booking officer checked on him twice. Both times, Aaron was in the same position, same posture, same expression. Nothing. The officer would later tell investigators that it unnerved him. "Everyone reacts," he said. "Everyone. Angry, scared, crying, yelling. This guy just sat there like he was waiting for something." He was. At 11:42 a.m., Aaron was given his phone call. Standard procedure. 1 call. The booking officer handed him the phone and stepped back, expecting to hear a lawyer's name or a family member. Aaron dialed a number from memory. 10 digits. No hesitation. The phone rang twice. Someone picked up, and Aaron said 5 words. The package has been delivered. That's it. 5 words. Then he hung up and handed the phone back. The booking officer stared at him. Aaron sat back down on the bench, folded his hands, and went back to waiting. On the other end of that call, 180 miles away, a room full of people had just gotten the signal they'd been waiting 4 months to hear. The State Bureau of Professional Standards. Headquarters. A secure operations center on the 4th floor of a building with no signs out front and no listed phone number. Inside that room sat 12 investigators, 2 assistant attorneys general, a forensic data analyst, and a federal liaison from the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. On the wall, a timeline, 3 years long. Photographs, transcripts, complaint records, audio logs, internal memos. All of it connected by colored threads leading to one name in the center. Gerald Thornton. The operation had a name. They called it Common Grounds. When Aaron's call came through, 5 words on a monitored line, the lead coordinator stood up and said one sentence to the room. "We're live. Execute the warrant package." Within 90 minutes, a convoy of unmarked vehicles was on the highway heading toward Ridgemont. Now let me tell you who Aaron Cole actually is. Aaron Cole is not a retired school teacher. He never was. He is not a newcomer to Ridgemont. And he is not a victim. Aaron Cole is the Deputy Director of the State Bureau of Professional Standards. He is the highest-ranking internal affairs officer in the state. He holds a law degree from Howard University. He spent a decade as a special agent in the FBI's Civil Rights Division. He has led investigations into 11 police departments across 4 states. He has a federal badge, a security clearance, and the legal authority to dismantle any law enforcement agency in the state that violates the civil rights of its citizens. And for the past 3 years, he has been building a case against Chief Gerald Thornton and the Ridgemont Police Department. Here's how it happened, year by year. Year 1, 2022 to 2023. After the statewide civil rights report flagged Ridgemont, Aaron's bureau opened a preliminary inquiry. His team pulled every complaint filed against the Ridgemont PD in the previous 8 years. What they found was a pattern so consistent, it almost looked intentional. Racially targeted stops concentrated in black neighborhoods. Use of force incidents where the subject was black at a rate 4 times higher than the city's demographics would predict. And a complaint system that functioned like a shredder. Cases went in, nothing came out. But the data alone wasn't enough. Internal complaints had been buried for years. The system that was supposed to investigate itself had been compromised from the top. Aaron needed more. Year 2, 2023 to 2024. Aaron authorized the undercover operation. Detective Ray Coleman, 11 years on the force, spotless record, handpicked by Aaron personally, was embedded in Common Grounds as a barista. Nora Whitfield, after that quiet meeting in the diner 2 towns over, agreed to wear a wire. Audio equipment was installed in the shop under the cover of a routine renovation. Witness interviews were conducted outside of Ridgemont to prevent leaks. 14 people agreed to cooperate. Former officers, business owners, residents who had filed complaints and been ignored. Every one of them had a story. Every one of them had been waiting for someone to listen. Year 3, 2024 to 2025. This is when Aaron did something that most people in his position would never do. He went in himself. He moved to Ridgemont, rented an apartment, built a cover identity so boring nobody would look twice. Retired school administrator, quiet, polite, keeps to himself. He went to Common Grounds every morning because intelligence reports indicated that Thornton had a pattern of confronting black patrons there. Aaron needed a live incident, not just historical data, not just witness testimony, a documented, recorded, real-time civil rights violation committed by the chief himself against a state official. That would make the case bulletproof. So Aaron sat at that corner table, every morning, newspaper open, coffee black, reading glasses on, waiting. And on a Tuesday in March, Chief Gerald Thornton walked through the door and gave him exactly what he needed. Now go back. Rewind everything you've seen so far. Watch it again with new eyes. The newspaper Aaron carried everywhere, not a habit, a concealed recording device built into the fold of the spine. The reading glasses. equipped with a micro camera so small it's invisible to the naked eye. It captured Thornton's face, his badge, his hand on his weapon, and every second of the assault. Ray behind the counter, wiping the same glass over and over. Not nervous, recording. His unit was transmitting live audio to a surveillance van parked 2 blocks north. Nora gripping the counter. Her wire was hot the entire time. Every word Thornton said went straight to a digital recorder in the back office. Aaron's calm when Thornton grabbed him. Not passivity, not fear. Operational discipline. The same discipline that kept his heart rate at 62 beats per minute while a man twice his size slammed his face into a table. And that line, make sure the paperwork is filed correctly. Every box. That wasn't shock. That was Aaron ensuring the arrest would be documented in a way that couldn't be altered, deleted, or lost. He was building the case from inside the cell. Chief Thornton handcuffed a man he was certain had no power. He didn't know that the man in those cuffs had the authority to end his career, and that by putting them on, Thornton had signed the warrant himself. The next morning, Chief Gerald Thornton pulled into the station parking lot at 7:48 a.m. Same time as always, same spot, same routine. Coffee from the drive-thru in one hand, keys in the other, walking through the back entrance like a man who owns the building. His secretary met him at the door. She looked different. Something in her face he couldn't read. She told him there were people waiting in the conference room. Thornton didn't think much of it. Budget season was coming. The city council had been scheduling meetings all month. He figured it was a liaison from the mayor's office or maybe someone from the planning department about the new precinct expansion. He pushed open the conference room door with his coffee still in his hand. 4 people were sitting at the table. He didn't recognize any of them. 2 men in dark suits, a woman with a legal pad and a state government ID badge clipped to her jacket, and a 4th person, older, silver-haired, wearing a lanyard that read, U.S. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. On the table in front of them, 6 binders, 2 laptops, a sealed evidence box, a digital recorder, and a stack of documents thick enough to fill a filing cabinet. Nobody stood up when Thornton walked in. That was the first sign. The woman with the legal pad spoke first. Her name was Patricia Dawson, Senior Investigator, State Bureau of Professional Standards. She didn't smile, didn't make small talk. She identified herself, stated her title, and then said the following, calmly, clearly, and without hesitation. Chief Thornton, we are here pursuant to a 3-year investigation into civil rights violations, abuse of authority, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering within the Ridgemont Police Department. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are the primary subject of this investigation. We strongly recommend you contact legal counsel before we proceed. Thornton didn't sit down. He stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, and for the first time in this entire story, Gerald Thornton had absolutely nothing to say. The blood left his face. His grip tightened on the cup. He looked at the binders on the table, then at the DOJ badge, then at Patricia Dawson. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Nothing came out. The man who had demanded Aaron Cole's ID. The man who told a black stranger to get out of his downtown. The man who slammed a face into a table and invented 3 charges on the spot. That man was standing in a doorway looking at the end of his career, and he couldn't form a sentence. Patricia Dawson waited 3 full seconds. Then she gestured to the empty chair at the end of the table. Please sit down, Chief. This is going to take a while. He sat. They started with the data. Bind 1. The pattern. Over 340 formal complaints had been filed against the Ridgemont Police Department during Thornton's 15-year tenure as chief. Of those, 89% involved black residents. And of that 89%, fewer than 3% resulted in any form of discipline. Not termination, not suspension, any discipline at all. A written warning, a note in a file, anything. The investigators walked Thornton through selected cases. Not all of them, just enough to establish the pattern. A black business owner on the East Side who was stopped and searched walking to his own store every Monday morning for 6 months straight. Different officers each time. Same result. No charges, no contraband, no explanation. A black teenager detained for 2 hours for looking lost in a neighborhood on the west side. He was walking home from a friend's house. He was 14. A black minister, Reverend Whitmore, the same man who wrote the open letter, pulled over 11 times in a single year. 11. Not one citation issued. Not one. Each case followed the same arc. Complaint filed, internal review opened. Review conducted by officers who reported to Thornton. Case closed. Pattern repeated. Thornton's lawyer, a man named Howard Price, who had arrived 20 minutes into the session, was taking notes without expression. But the pen moved faster with each case. Binder 2. The cover-up. Internal communications, emails, memos, text messages, all obtained through subpoena. The investigators showed Thornton a series of emails between himself and his internal affairs supervisor. In one message, after a complaint was filed about an officer using excessive force during a traffic stop on a black driver, Thornton wrote, and the investigators read his own words back to him, a directive telling his subordinate to close the case quickly and quietly. The language was careful, but the meaning was unmistakable. Make it disappear. Don't let it escalate. Keep it out of the press. There were more. Dozens more. A text message telling an officer not to put details in writing. An email rerouting a complaint away from the one internal affairs officer who had a reputation for being thorough. A memo, handwritten, scanned, and archived, instructing staff to classify certain complaints as informational rather than actionable, which meant they were logged but never investigated. The system wasn't broken, it was functioning exactly the way Thornton had designed it. Binder 3. Common grounds. This was the operational evidence, the centerpiece. Everything that happened inside that coffee shop on that Tuesday morning captured and preserved from 3 separate angles. Audio recording 1. Aaron Cole's concealed device, embedded in the spine of his newspaper. Crystal clear. Every word Thornton said, from "How long you been sitting here?" to the sound of the handcuffs clicking shut. Audio recording 2. Nora Whitfield's cooperating wire. Captured the ambient sound of the shop. The silence after Thornton's first remark. The gasps when Aaron was slammed into the table. The shaking breath of the young mother pulling her child toward the door. Audio recording 3. Ray Coleman's behind-the-counter unit. Picked up everything from a different angle, including Thornton's voice when he announced the fabricated charges to the room. And then there was the video. The college student's cell phone footage. Shaky, framed badly, but it showed everything. Thornton standing over Aaron, the grab, the slam, the cuffs, and the walk through the shop. 43 seconds of footage that would eventually be viewed by every major news outlet in the state. But the most critical piece of evidence was something Thornton thought he had already destroyed. Officer Brenda Sullivan's body camera. Sullivan's camera was active during the entire encounter. Department policy required it. The footage showed everything. Thornton's approach, his words, his hands on Aaron, the fabricated charges, and Sullivan's own face as she stood 3 feet away and did nothing. 20 minutes after the arrest, that footage was flagged in the department system as corrupted. The file was marked for deletion, standard procedure for data errors. Except it wasn't a data error, and the investigators knew it, because they had already recovered the original file from a backup server that Thornton didn't know existed. The state's forensic data team had been monitoring Ridgemont's digital evidence systems for months. Every deletion, every modification, every flag, all of it tracked, logged, and preserved. The footage was intact, every second. Patricia Dawson played it on one of the laptops. No commentary, no narration, just the footage. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Thornton watched himself on screen, his own hands grabbing a man who'd done nothing wrong, his own voice calling that man a criminal, his own face, confident, smug, untouchable. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. Thornton stopped watching. But the investigators weren't done, because there was another interview happening at the same time in a different building 30 miles away. Brenda Sullivan. She sat in a plain room across from a state investigator. She was out of uniform, civilian clothes. Her badge was on the table in front of her, not on her chest. She looked like she hadn't slept. Sullivan testified for 3 hours. She told them she had witnessed Thornton target black customers at common grounds on at least 4 separate occasions before the incident with Aaron. She described the culture inside the department, how officers who questioned Thornton's methods were reassigned to graveyard shifts, passed over for promotions, or subjected to what she called loyalty reviews that functioned as intimidation. She described the morning of the arrest in detail, how she knew from the moment Thornton walked into the shop and spotted Aaron what was about to happen, how she felt her stomach drop, how she reached for her radio and then didn't press it, how she stood there 3 feet away and watched a man get assaulted for drinking coffee. When the investigator asked her why she didn't intervene, Sullivan was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I knew it was wrong, every time, but I told myself that if I stayed quiet, if I kept my head down, I could change things from the inside eventually. I was lying to myself. I know that now." The narrator doesn't judge Sullivan here, doesn't condemn her, doesn't excuse her either. Just lets the words sit. And then asks the audience a question they'll carry for the rest of the video. How many officers in that department felt the same way Brenda Sullivan did? How many watched and said nothing? Not because they agreed, but because the cost of speaking up was too high. And what does it say about a system when the only person who could break it open had to come from the outside? Back in the conference room, Thornton's lawyer requested a break. When they returned, Thornton gave a statement. He denied everything. He said the arrest was legitimate. He said Aaron Cole was behaving suspiciously. He said the complaints against his department were politically motivated. He said the statewide civil rights report was flawed. He said he had served the city of Ridgemont with integrity for 15 years and that this investigation was an overreach. Then Patricia Dawson pressed play on the audio recording. Thornton's own voice filled the room, clear, unmistakable, every word. His lawyer put a hand on his arm again. This time, Thornton listened. He invoked his right to remain silent, didn't say another word for the rest of the session. The narrator pauses here and lets the symmetry land. The man who demanded that Aaron Cole identify himself and explain why he was sitting in a coffee shop now sat in a room full of evidence and refused to explain himself. The man who told a black stranger to shut his mouth chose silence when it was his own words being played back to him. The man who thought he was untouchable had just discovered what it feels like when the system turns around and looks at you. 3 weeks later, the state attorney general held a press conference. It was carried live by every local station and picked up by 2 national networks within the hour. The podium was flanked by the state seal on one side and the Department of Justice emblem on the other. Behind the attorney general stood a row of officials, investigators, federal liaisons, legal counsel. And in the center of that row, in a dark suit with his badge visible for the first time in this story, stood Aaron Cole. Not the quiet man from the coffee shop, not the retired teacher with the newspaper and the reading glasses. The deputy director of the State Bureau of Professional Standards. The man who ran the entire operation from a corner table. The attorney general read the charges. Gerald Thornton, chief of police Ridgemont, charged with civil rights violations under color of law, false arrest, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, specifically the deletion of Officer Sullivan's body camera footage. 4 charges, each one carrying the possibility of federal prosecution on top of the state case. The cameras flashed so fast they sounded like rain. Reporters scrambled. The story they thought they knew, a small-town police chief, a routine arrest, a minor controversy, just exploded into something much bigger. 3 years of investigation, 14 cooperating witnesses, hundreds of hours of recorded evidence, an undercover operation run by one of the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the state, inside a coffee shop. Thornton was suspended without pay, effective immediately. His badge was surrendered, his service weapon collected. The narrator describes this moment without celebration. No dramatic music, no slow motion, just the mechanics of accountability. A form signed, a badge placed in a manila envelope, a door closed, a nameplate removed from a desk. 15 years as chief, over in an afternoon. But Thornton wasn't the only one who fell. Deputy Mayor Elaine Foster, the woman who took Thornton's calls and never asked questions. The investigators found that she had received 12 separate notifications about complaints against the Ridgemont PD over a 4-year period. 12. Formal notifications from community organizations, from the city's own Human Resources Department, from the statewide Civil Rights Report. She acknowledged each one. She acted on none. Foster held a press conference of her own 2 days later. She expressed shock and deep concern about the allegations. She called for a thorough and transparent review. She used the phrase "moving forward" 4 times in 6 minutes. 2 months later, she resigned. The official reason? Personal considerations. The real reason was sitting in 6 binders in a conference room. The state imposed a consent decree on the Ridgemont Police Department. For those unfamiliar, a consent decree is a legally binding agreement, not a suggestion, not a recommendation, but an enforceable mandate backed by the courts. Ridgemont was required to implement a full set of reforms. Mandatory bias training for every officer annually. An independent oversight board with the authority to review complaints, subpoena records, and recommend discipline, reporting to the state, not to the chief. Body camera policies with tamper-proof cloud storage. No more flagging footage as corrupted. No more quiet deletions. And a community review board made up of actual residents, not appointed by the mayor, not vetted by the department, with real power to hold officers accountable. Officer Brenda Sullivan was not charged. Her cooperation was noted in the official record. She resigned from the Ridgemont PD voluntarily and 6 months later enrolled in a graduate program in criminal justice reform. The narrator doesn't frame this as redemption. Sullivan doesn't get to be the hero of a story where she watched a man get assaulted and did nothing. But she made a choice about what came next. That counts for something. How much is up to you? Nora Whitfield kept Common Grounds open. She didn't give interviews, didn't write op-eds, didn't start a podcast. She put a small hand-painted sign in the window by the front door. 5 words. Everyone belongs here. No explanation, no hashtag, just the sign. It's still there. And Aaron Cole, the man at the center of all of it. He didn't hold a press conference of his own, didn't write a book, didn't do a media tour. He went back to his office at the bureau, closed the Ridgemont file, and opened the next one. Because Ridgemont wasn't the only town on his list, and Gerald Thornton wasn't the only chief who thought he was untouchable. Here's the thing about this story. It would be easy to watch it and feel like justice won. Thornton got charged. Sullivan testified. The department got reformed. The sign went up in the window. Roll credits. But that's not the whole picture. And if I left it there, I wouldn't be telling you the truth. The consent decree in Ridgemont will take years to fully implement. Some officers will resist it. Some will leave. Some will stay and quietly do the same things they've always done, just more carefully. Reform on paper and reform in practice are 2 very different things. And anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. Across this country, there are departments just like Ridgemont. Towns that look great on a brochure. Welcome signs that say all the right words. Leadership that smiles for the camera and buries complaints in a filing cabinet. The data is clear. The vast majority of internal investigations into police misconduct are resolved without any discipline. Not because the complaints aren't valid, but because the people investigating the complaints report to the same people being complained about. That's not a system with a flaw. That's a system designed to protect itself. What made Ridgemont different wasn't that one man was brave. Aaron Cole was brave, there's no question about that. He sat in a chair and let a man twice his size slam his face into a table because the mission required it. That takes something most people don't have. But bravery alone doesn't change systems. What changed Ridgemont was that a structure existed, the Bureau of Professional Standards, with the independence, the resources, and the legal authority to investigate from the outside. Aaron didn't fight the system alone. He used a system designed to check the one that had failed. And that's the real question this story leaves behind. Not whether Aaron Cole is a hero, but how many towns don't have an Aaron Cole? How many departments have no outside oversight? How many Brenda Sullivans are standing 3 feet away right now, watching something they know is wrong, telling themselves they'll change things from the inside? How many coffee shops have someone sitting in them right now being told they don't belong? So here's my question to you, and I want you to really sit with it. If you were in that coffee shop, watching it happen right in front of you in real time, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up, pulled out your phone, looked away? There's no wrong answer, but there is an honest one. Drop it in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, anger, hope, frustration, anything, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't. We tell stories here that matter. And the next one is going to hit even harder.
62 beats per minute. That's how calm Aaron was while getting cuffed. 3 years of waiting, and the chap just handed him everything. But you know what keeps hitting me? It wasn't Aaron alone. Like, yeah, he's incredible, but think about it. Nora, this 63-year-old woman running a coffee shop, someone called her up and say, "Hey, would you wear a wire?" And she just says yes. No drama, just yes. Ray was away from 11 years as a detective to make latex for months. Brenda sits down in the room and tells the truth, knowing her career is done. These people weren't trying to be heroes. They were just tired of staying quiet. And that's the part that really hits. Because silence isn't doing nothing. Every person who watched Thornton walk into the shop and looked the other way. They were making a choice too. They just didn't want to see it that way. And real talk, forget Richmond for a second. Think about your life, your job, your circle. Where are you the one who speaks up? And where are you the one looking away? You don't gotta answer me. Just be honest with yourself. But if you want to share, drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story struck with you, send it to someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, because next time a cop's daughter finds a fire in his desk, that changes everything. Some doors don't close.